creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk. Paul Shergill. Seriously, the Oilers? Paul Shergill, thank you very much for coming on Shed Talk.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
And you know what's really interesting is that you and I have talked we've known each other for years and years and
yeah.
years and years. And your home building industry with Prominent Homes and all the stuff that you do.
Yeah.
What else do you do besides building?
I mean, I don't know. I somebody asked me that the other day, and it's kind of all I do. I don't know. Like, I joke that I'm a one-trick pony. I know how to build homes. I really like it. It's like, having something that you really like to do. But other than that, it's like kids and family. So I got 2 girls, and if I'm not working, I want to spend time with them. I want to do things that they're doing. They're getting a little bit older, 8 and 11. So the 11-year-old's kind of like, you can see it's starting where like she doesn't want me to hang around as much. And so I'm like, okay, I've only got like a smaller window of time even with the younger one. Let's do that. But yeah, really outside of work, it's family time. So like the 4 of us, then I've got my parents and my in-laws and my siblings around. And I do a lot of that, and really a lot of, any time that I spend outside of work is sometimes with work. So all my social events are based around, because all my friends are in the industry.
Oh no, and that's for sure.
You're just so wrapped up in this, world, or not so much in this industry, but also other business, people, or they're owners of their own businesses and stuff like that. So we just have the commonalities, and that's just who I end up talking with and hanging out with.
And so when you got into the home building industry, how did you first get into it?
So my dad started the business back in 1990. He was in construction in the early 80s. And his older brother was in it, and his older brother was an engineer by trade, and then he got into real estate, was buying and flipping. They called them like MRVs, like the multi-residential like units. And so they were buying them, renovating them and selling them out. So he hired my dad as like a project manager, because my dad was essentially kicked out of university, was floating around having fun, doing nothing. And he's like, hey, why don't you come and, manage, like site supervise these apartments. And so he did that, and then in the early 80s, he basically the National Energy Program came into Alberta, and so he had about $350,000. So in our office, we've got a little bit like these 2 like faux leather chairs, but they're like those old school like grand ones that are pretty cool. And so he had $350,000. Went down to California. So half his brothers and sisters are here in Calgary, and the other half, or about 4 or 5, are in California. And went down there, and he did some construction, but then he opened up a pizza shop. And then that went under. And then he had a plumbing and bath, like kitchen, just like a display room and renovation showroom. And that went under. And then he had a couple of things, built some houses, and that was about 7 years. And he ended up losing it all. So kind of 3 businesses, started, stopped. And he moved back to Calgary. And all he came back with was these 2 chairs that I still have in my office today. And so I always joke that these 2 chairs are worth $350,000. And so that's and so I grew up like always seeing him working and doing his own thing in construction, the pizza business, just always kind of being an entrepreneur. And then when we were growing up in the 90s, we lived in it was in Scenic Acres for most of it. And he had a home office. And so I'd always just, I could hear him. He would do meetings in there, and I would, sit on the stairs or sit in the hallway, and I could hear him. And then I remember being like 10 or 11, and I knew just from meeting and hanging out with him, I'd know all the trades names, and I'd know what companies were using for windows and doors. And it was Beaver Lumber back in the day, and it was like Cousins and Sons windows, if they were still there. And then when I was 12, he's like, all right, cool. You're gonna drop. He dropped me off at like 7, 8 in the morning. He's like, okay, every 3rd house on this block is ours, and I'll pick you up at 4 o'clock. And he'd give like our painter or our finisher like $5-10 to buy me lunch when the lunch lady would come around in those trucks that used to be around. And so that was my job since I was 12, every summer, cleaning up lumber. And then so I was in high school playing football, and I just thought like, okay, I'm just gonna like take over my dad's company. This is easy, right? Like, I'll just do that. And then he was like, well, no, if you don't go out and get a degree, you're not gonna move out of the mud. And so I was like, so essentially, if I don't go to school, then I'm like gonna, cleaning up job sites and sweeping for the rest of my life. And I'm like, well, that's not cool. And then didn't want to go to university. Like, I didn't really have good grades. I was just, messing around in high school. And then but through football, I was able to get I went up to U of A and played football up there. And so I went up to University of Alberta. I spent 5.5 years there, but after my first year, my uncle was building homes up in Edmonton. And so I had his trade base, and then the capital came from Calgary. We'd build a couple houses, then I'd move into one, sell the other one, then build the next one, sell the other one. And that was kind of '01 to '06. So it was like the run up in the industry in the province was pretty good. And so every house I would build and flip, it just was better and better. And then I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then this is so easy. All you got to do is just build a house and sell it, and you make a bunch of money. And then I came out of school in '06, and I came back down to Calgary, and so I started working full time in the office. I went out in the field as site super, then some estimating and warranty. But you'd come in and I had buddies that were paying off student debt, and they're teachers, or they're doing their jobs, or they're trying to find work. And I'm like, you guys should come builders. Like this is the easiest thing in the world. This is awesome. And then it stopped, and then you're like, oh shit, now what do we got to do? All right, we got to take care of our customers. We got to run a business. We got to how do we got to plan out sales. We got to budget. We got to, and then so then it was really in '07, '08 that I'm like, oh shit, now we got to do something with this and figure it out. And it's been, you see some ups and downs, and here we are now. So it's
So, okay.
kind
So
of
now,
exciting.
so here you are. Yeah.
Long story. Yeah, that's how I got started. Yeah.
But even getting started, so you're in a family business now. So your dad owns the business. Okay?
No, we changed ownership. Yeah.
So when you change ownership, you took it over right from them?
So we started estate planning in 17, and then in 2019, I thought it was. I have three sisters. So there's four of us. So we were planning on something, and I was trying to set up my dad, because the whole thing is it's easier when he's at the table to have this conversation than when he's not. And nothing tears apart a family more than money and estate and business kind of thing, right? So especially in a family-owned business. So I was lucky enough to be aware of that, and to have the openness with my dad and my parents to talk about these conversations. So we started estate planning, and then in 2019 he kind of blindsided me, which was on the good side. He said, hey, we've got some money in the company, but that's going to be the family's money, and you're going to get prominent at this value, and then he loans the money back. So I own the business, but he's my bank.
He's your banker and bank. Because it's interesting when we're talking about this, and a lot of people in family businesses and going back and then growing a business and having family, your trust and your trust companies and all these type of being able to actually have that conversation with a family and to be and survive years ago. What would you recommend or talk when people are asking, they're dealing with their families in family business, to have that conversation? Like you just mentioned about being open at the dinner table, having your dad there versus not having him there, to have that conversation. Because a lot of people have a problem with actually sitting down and having that conversation versus, I want all this money, I need this money, and to have that, because that's very difficult.
Yeah.
How did you get through that?
I think we're probably lucky that we just had I think a big part of it is that, I don't know, ego is a big part of it. So not you got to check your ego and just realize nothing good comes from having a big ego, especially around in a family, in a business. So having we would, because we worked together from '06 to 17, 19 kind of thing, but he got involved with CHBA at the municipal and provincial and national level. So over 8-9 years, he was more and more outside of the day-to-day business, and I was trying to learn at the same time. But we would always talk, and then so him being out of the day-to-day, but we could talk. We would argue at the office, and then I lived at home till I was 27. So then we go.
And you're
home
28 now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
much,
with 11-year-old.
Exactly,
No doubt it.
But so we could get in an argument or disagreement. We'd really never argue. Me and him, we talk about things which are pretty good, and then we'd go home and just have dinner together and be cool about it. And we were able to draw a line of it's not personal. It's this is an idea. What's your idea? Here's my idea. Do they collaborate? Do they collide? And how do we figure it out from there, kind of thing? Because 9 times out of 10, he's seen this before me. And so it's usually I'm coming to him with an angle or an idea or a question or a problem, and he's seen it, and then he's seen it before, or from being outside the daily hustle of the company, he's seeing it from a different angle, and then you can bounce some ideas off and get some. So for us, it was going back to the question, I guess, how do you deal with family businesses? Is ego will kill you and drag you down if you let it. Confidence, I think, is different than ego. But yeah, and just having that openness to talk, and then knowing, yeah, like, hey, let's just draw it to the line, and like not take it personal, not take it home, and having that conversation up front about it, I guess, to know this is how it's going to work.
So when you've got the company, you're moved over, now you're set up to go.
Yeah.
All right, sink or swim. Were you doing the land purchasing as well?
Yeah, like, so that's so with my dad pulling, because he was kind of semi-retired, so he would, he lived like half the year down in the Caribbean, and so he would be down there, and so I was, for the longest time, like, yeah, like over the last few years, like all the land positions we're in were relationships that I was able to build, but they were all through him, hanging out with him at CHBA and at national conferences. I would just get to sit at a table and like listen. And then, okay, how do guys develop relationships? Who's who in the room? Who's who in the market in Calgary? And then I kind of like was being part of that next generation. Okay, who's the next guy in the company that's coming up? And then who do I connect with and not? Because, the guys that are 50 and 60 are going to connect here, and who's in their 20s and 30s that, work with. And then a lot of the guys, you just hanging out with them, and when they were PMs and development managers, and now they're presidents, and now they're they're running the company. So you're like, you just keep those connections, and it was like luck, but also a long game of knowing that, hey, I'm going to be in this industry for a while. So yeah, doing land purchases and setting up land deals and stuff are all part of it, but we knew we had to get there to grow the company.
So as a builder, and for the average person out there, they're buying houses now. The houses are way up price or wherever they're at. What's the hardest part as being a builder? Is it the land purchasing or the building?
Both. I mean, it's super capital intensive, especially the land. If you don't start building fast enough to pay out your lots, and then also if you're building to trying to get trades and labor, like supply in this market right now, as a builder though. But like in good times right now, this is when guys our size get squeezed out, because the really big builders will go in and they'll buy up like a whole phase, and they'll be able to drop a check for 3, 4, $5 million, where I could do 20% down and pay you out over 12 months. So, our pockets aren't as big as some of the other guys, but, we're getting there. And then that's the play, is to get in on some equity side of the deals. So you can solidify your inventory that you can sell to the market. And so, yeah, it's a balance. But then once you do have the house, you got to have the trades and the team to execute and build it. So it's like, having both. And we've always had, like, because we haven't, had a land supply or equity side of a lot of deals. So we've got we're really good at building houses. And then now it was like, over the last kind of decade, it was like, how do we build a business that's good at building houses? It was kind of my, goal and plan, and like, so having land inventory, having like a runway, having the cash flow and the modeling and the financing to line it all up.
So how important is it to have mentors? So here you are, started. And we talked earlier, and you belong to tech.
Yeah.
And when did you realize, or having that first aha moment, that mentoring as a young entrepreneur yourself, and then getting into this, when does that become important? Or when did you notice it was important?
It's for, yeah, like, when you look back, it's like, holy shit, like, I've been doing this my whole life, kind of thing, right? But I noticed it was really important, really when I was kind of put into a leadership position in the company. And my dad was, working with CHPA National, and he's out on the road kind of 250 days out of the year. And then he was, spending more time out east in the Caribbean. So he's not there. So I was like, I have these weird questions, and I have no idea how to answer them, and I have to figure this out. And I've got like, 10, 12 people that rely on me to pay their mortgage every month, because we got to get cash in and cash out to them. And so you got staff, and so you're like, okay, I gotta, like, so through the industry, I would just ask a bunch of builders, and like Calgary and Alberta for the most part too, but Calgary particularly it's one of the coolest industries. Like, you're in it, and like, it's so open. Like, you can go to guys and like, hey, I got it. Like, how do you do this, or what do you do this? And you've had this scenario, and like, how do you figure it out? And they'll answer your question, and they'll pick up the phone. And so you can call guys at Shane, you can call guys at, Albie, Jamin, like, in like any, like all these big guys, and like, they'll pick up the phone. And so having a lot of friends in the industry, like, that was really helpful. And then I heard of Tech Canada, I heard of EO a lot, and I heard, but I always felt I couldn't go in EO because I wasn't the guy that founded it. So I was like, okay, I thought that was just for entrepreneurs that started the business. So I saw Tech, and then I saw companies like Canyon Plumbing, back in the day, there was Icon Stone and Granite, Jean that was there, Crystal Creek's in it, Albie was in it, and then so when I saw these companies, I'm like, they're all doing like really well. And I'm like, there's got to be something in that magic water, like the juice over there, and so I always wanted to get in, and then I finally had the courage one day to put my hand up and like, yeah, hey, can I join? And I went through the interview process, and I laughed because like I got interviewed by the group, and I'm like, I've always been given a job. Like this is like my second. I worked at A&W for like 6 weeks one summer, and that was like I've never had an interview other than A&W. So I was like getting interviewed by these guys. I'm like, I don't know. Like here's some questions. I don't know how to answer them, and it was awesome. And then but being in that group, I knew I really wanted it, and I got in, and it's been like a life changer for me. Like not even a game changer, but it's changed my life because I've had guys and women around that table that have really mentored me and really like shown me like a better path, and it's made me like a better husband, a better father, and a better business person, better leader in the company. But yeah, mentors are huge because it's hard to reinvent the wheel, but there's so many people that have done this before you, and so like ask for that info and then give it back too, right? When you got guys younger than you that have questions, like you gotta pay it forward and give them the same opportunity you got, kind of thing.
And it's interesting because when you look at tech, it's an all day. So you have your moderator, and the actual thing. What's really interesting of having great moderators, obviously, because your moderator does it, is that the egos are left at the door, like you said.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing about it is that guy that's next door to you, he might have $100 million, or this guy has $1 million, or whatever they are, and it becomes a true no ask, and
Yeah.
it's an experience sharing that we all get to share together and actually go through life, like you said, personal, business, economics, and family. Just family and friends really can't dig deep to that actual
Yeah.
soul searching. Whew,
Yeah, like those
I'm
guys
in
know me
trouble.
better than my friends. They know me better
Yeah.
than my cousins. They know me better than my siblings at times, right? Because you tell them everything.
And how long have you been in tech for?
Ah, man, I think it's like 7 or 8 years.
7 and 8 years.
Yeah, like it might be 9, because I had my second daughter right when I started, so she's 8, so it's more than 8, or sorry, less than 8, but
How many people in tech do you have?
there's about 14 to 16 in our group. It fluctuates up and down, but yeah.
So how many have they changed every year?
It's, through COVID changed a lot. So we were pretty steady. And then COVID, we had guys that would come in because we went online and it was hard online. And the guys that came out and, it was almost like a year and a half, like, so, 12, 13, 14 months of online meetings that we got back in person. Now it's like, we'll maybe change over 2 people a year, but there was about 4 to 5 of the group. But there's a core group of us that have been around for about 6, 7 years that are we're pretty tight. And then we've got a good culture in the group. And
No, and that's so important. So growing up, obviously in the construction industry, and then here you are owning your own business in the construction industry, from sweeping the floors back in the day, okay, and you're starting to where you are now and looking at the environment back then to the environment today, because the house prices went from, and I'll just say 50,000 to 200,000, meaning
yeah.
as a build. Has that been a huge impact? Like, do you see much difference from 15, 20 years ago to today in the building process?
In the building,
Not the costing.
but yeah, in the like, technology for sure. And I've like fortunately enough, I love shiny new things. So if there's a new thing out there, a new toy, I'm like, I want to play. I want to just play with it. So when there's new tech in the industry, like I want to look into it and I want to see how can we use this for our business. How can we use it for. So yeah, like scheduling is all online. Everything's by the phone, right? So like all of our plans. I'm surprised half our framers use their phone for the plans. Like they have like one printout in the truck, but if they're looking at a room, they'll just pull it up on their phone. They'll look and see how much spacing they need, and so the ability to have everything mobile is huge. Safety's done like a really big jump, which is really good for our industry because it's always been big commercial, residential. Now it's coming in, which is really good to see because that's super important. But for building a house, yeah, it's just gotten. I think it's almost like the process has stayed the same, right? It's kind of funny,
Yeah,
but you're finding little ways to be more efficient and tweak it, and it comes into like design almost more than the construction, like hands on the ground. But like, how can can we standardize like these cabinet lengths so that now it's the same every time, and now we're having less wastage on this type of wood or this type of countertops, and we can get these get these things in faster. They can fit in a container. So okay, build cap your islands at 10 feet. Don't make them 10 and a half or 11 because that's the perfect size for this slab of quartz or something like that. But
Well, it's kind of like they see plywood. Why is a 4x8 sheet a 4x8 sheet?
yeah,
Like, okay, well, because of transportation. The highways are
simple
only
bit,
built the way they are, so that's why do we have a 4x8? That's why it's called a 4x8 sheet. So
yeah,
to build that. So
fits
back
in
in the
there.
day, as it gets better.
Yeah. And
What?
when lumber was going up, we were like, we were breaking down footprints and we were changing our floor plans to be more efficient so that you have limited waste of sheets on the floor, right? Because these things went up to like 70, 80, $100 a sheet almost. And so like, all right, how do we redesign this house? So if we shave off like 4 inches here and extend it 6 inches this way, then now we can use, 32 whole sheets on one floor or something like that instead of
Yeah,
34.
and it's interesting because when you look at a builder or builders, and then you're going in, the guys that have been in this for a long time, like yourself, the Shanes, and you look at that, the guys that have done it, they're very good at it. You guys are very
Yeah.
good at it, and then you get the guys that are startups, and they think that they can build a house. Okay, the house prices are rentals. It's this high. It's this. Oh, it's kind of like somebody, if you get on an elevator and your bellhop tells you tax tips, or not even tax tips, investment. Here's your investment. It's going to blow up, or it's going to have a bubble.
Yeah.
So now people are jumping into the housing market, and the difference between Calgary and Edmonton, is there a big difference between the two, as in a build
Yeah.
standpoint?
Yeah. In a efficiency product standpoint, it's very different. It's pretty funny. But like Alberta has a really high building standard compared to the rest of the country, compared to like North America. But even Calgary and Edmonton, you get away with, because it's a bit more. The price point in Edmonton's a little bit different, and so you can get with a little bit lower spec in the houses. But also Edmonton's like it's like it used traditionally it's like an $100,000 price point, but right now it's like about $180,000 to $200,000 price point.
Between the two,
It's single family to single family.
Calgary
On
and Edmonton.
Yeah, so there's like a huge gap, and Edmonton's finally been picking up in the last, call it 3 months, 2.5 months. So like by this summer and fall, like Edmonton's gonna have, like, I call it a renaissance. Like they're gonna come through and they're gonna get like all the out of province buyers that we have coming in. That 200 grand, 220, 250 grand when it gets there is gonna be enough to convince them to go to Edmonton versus Calgary.
But why is there such a difference between the two?
Just a lot over the last 2 years. Out of like, if we have 60% of our buyers come from out of province, they were just choosing Calgary. And so the local market, it's kind of what happened in Vancouver like 10 15, well, 15 20 years ago when they had the Olympics, was that the local community and the local market there was getting priced out, but people coming from all out of country, were looking and they're like, oh, this is a great value, great price, so they're driving the prices up. And we're having the same thing here in Alberta, where the local market is like, well, I can't believe houses have gone up this much. They're up 13-15%. They're up 40 grand a year, since January. What's going on? But like guys coming here from out of province, they're like, well, they're laughing and they're like, oh, well, I'll take two, right? Because they're coming in from BC or Toronto at like $2 million, and they'll come over here. And then the feedback we get in show homes is that people, they come here, they go up to Edmonton, they have family, their friends, come back down to Calgary, and they're choosing Calgary just because the city layout or the vibrancy of the downtown and the city. I wish our hockey team was a little bit more competitive, but they're not choosing cities over hockey teams, and so they're choosing Calgary. But now that 200 grand is going to start talking to them, and that 250 if it spreads out even more. So Edmonton's going to start pulling some of the buyers. They were coming into Calgary and up to Edmonton. So I think Calgary might see a bit of a slowdown like over the next kind of 6 to 12 months because we're going to lose some people to Edmonton, but there's a lot of people still coming in.
So think about the revitalization of downtown Calgary. Okay, the new hockey arena coming in.
Yeah.
And the government. Okay, so talking about housing, basically government throwing in this X amount of money to build new condos and stuff like that. How does that affect Calgary for the future? And there's some negatives there and positives, because obviously having a new hockey arena is awesome. My personal opinion.
Yeah.
Calgary will definitely get up there past Edmonton eventually.
It will. I mean, you see that across North America whenever a new arena goes in, it's always the same political battle. Like, for hockey stadiums, baseball stadiums, like football stadiums, like the city says no, the owner wants it, the developers want it, the city says no, then you go back and forth. It takes about 2-3 years, and then they eventually end up building it. Calgary's taken a little bit longer. We've taken 7-8 years, but that's also because COVID came in the middle, and COVID shot up like costs for building almost 50-60%. So that old model that they had an agreement on, it had to get blown up. So now it's back together, and I think it's really going to help, and I think they're going to do it right. We got to get some more hotels, I think, and they've got some coming up because then with like large conference centers, they fight over large conferences to come into Calgary from North America. We need hotel rooms for them to stay at, and they need to be able to walk to the conference center. So they'll get those going. It's really going to help with the new like zoning, that's in question right now. It'll be interesting. It's funny because as a business and a developer, you're like, yeah, this is awesome. Let's add more units and like more opportunity to build on. But as a homeowner, you're like, it's the same thing. It's like NIMBYism, right? You don't want it in your own backyard, so it's hard to.
And it's that question because I was watching the debate the other day, and it's like, okay, so here I am as a home builder, okay, and it's a great idea. Okay, here we go. We're going to get X amount of dollars, $1 billion coming in here, and then we can build any condo in any community. As a builder, I'm going, bring it on. I got six more coming, and is there going to be a labor problem, and will it actually be given back to the for low housing or right housing? I'm going to call it right housing.
And I think there's gonna be like big like multi guys that'll go in and do like towers and stuff like boardwalk. They'll open a boardwalk. They'll be able to punch in a bunch more apartment buildings. They'll have existing assets they can redeploy and like can renovate or rebuild on. But my fear is like in the rest of the areas that we're seeing like duplexes going up, like inner city Calgary and stuff. You're gonna have guys going in and building up these 4 units, and they're gonna put 4 units up, 4 units down. You gotta have 8 units there. So you're gonna have like 16, 8 units. You could have 16 cars next to your single family house. So if they get renters and they're gonna have 2 cars each, and even though you don't give them parking, they're still gonna come. My fear and the way I see it is that you're not gonna have like professional developers and builders building these inner city pieces because we're gonna stick to the greenfield. Right. That's what we're good at. We're good at suburbs. That's why you don't see a lot of like larger builders going inner city because the dollars don't make sense for how much you got to tie up in one piece of land to like build 2 units, 4 units, 8 units where you could that same $500,000 you could tie up 20 lots or 15 lots in a greenfield. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunistic investors that aren't really developers and builders that are going to be building these things. And so 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road when this thing's built, I mean, sure, they're not going to care about, what the aesthetics of the building look like, what the yard looks like, are the tenants taking care of it, is the garbage taken out, how many cars are there. But when that roof starts leaking 3 years from now, are they going to come around to go and fix it? Are they going to take care of the units? Are these things? And my fear is that they're not. They're going to go out there. There's government financing. They're going to own the thing at 5%, 95% financing, and like if they just walk away from it or they just won't maintain it, and it could the threat of that could potentially like destroy a lot of streetscapes around town, and then you're going to have pockets of town that are just
and
scary.
The visualization of what you've just said there, when you think about that, when you don't have no name, like you said, investors going in there 95% financed just to be able to put up pockets, it all of a sudden Detroit rings a bell, and then all of a sudden stuff like that, low housing, low economics in certain areas.
Yeah.
One of the questions I was thinking as well as looking at this is that when they look at housing, we look at housing or condos and stuff like that. How many of these locations are on the green line and the C train tracks? And I look at that. How many postal outlets that the government owns that they could actually tear down and build high rises that are actually on government land that can actually be a high rise there, that this product is not being utilized. So postal outlets.
Yeah.
So how many of those are being used to help out revitalize or housing crisis that they would say? But I can see where you're coming from internally on green space.
Yeah, like you look at Killarney or inner city, like I mean, if it happens to Mount Royal and Britannia, and they'll like that's scary. Like for me, I'm like that's I don't live there, but I know that's where I want to be in like the next 10 years, 15 years, and because that's a great spot, big yard, views, but if this thing happens, I mean, that might blow up my plans. Like, come on, don't do that to me.
So where do you see yourself now in the next 10 years coming into here? Because here you are being successful. You got your kids are growing, 11, they're growing up. Ambitions and desires and goals.
The goals. So I just turned 40 last year. So like I've always been told like, kind of in your 20s, you're farting around, you're figuring out what you want to do. In your 30s, you figure out what you want to do, but then your biggest earning potential is in your 40s, right? Is that decade, 40 to 50. So you got to set yourself up to hit the ground running, and I think I was able to do that with my wife, and we kind of both are aligned the same way. So hitting the ground running at 40, Over the next 10 years, yeah, I got big, goals or numbers in my head. But really it's, I want to be in the home building industry. I think we've got like a pretty good runway. So it's, making sure that we have the land inventory to build on. What's the plan B is that, if we don't get in showing positions, then we don't build multifamily yet, but, we'll have to learn that either faster or, if it goes to plan, it'll be in the next 3 to 4 years. We'll have to, start learning to do multifamily, and we've got some inner city assets that we can build on like that. So it's, and then we want to get into land, ownership on the equity side so we can start self-supplying some lots. So ideally, if we can over the next decade is have housing running, residential. We have a multifamily site that's doing, we're doing maybe 2 or 3 40-unit buildings a year. And then we'd also have a land development arm that we're invested in the land that's supplying our residential side. So we could have 3 of those. They could be separate businesses, but they're all complementary to what we know and what we do. Would be ideal.
Awesome.
And if I could keep it going in Calgary, that's the goal. Yeah.
Well, the rest is easy because right now where the market's at, well, what do we know?
The market's here, but I mean, we've been in Alberta for so long. We're jaded and we don't believe it. And
That's true.
We're waiting to get kicked in the nuts, and we're like,
Yeah.
and so now it's like, okay,
yeah.
well, how do we react when we get kicked in the nuts? And
Yeah.
I was telling our leadership team last week is like that Mike Tyson quote of everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, what's our plan? When we get punched in the face, what's our plan? And then when we get hit in the stomach, how are we going to react to that? And what happens if somebody kicks us in the knees and we fall down? How do we react to that? So we've got to have like, plan A, B, and C so that we have, business plan. Okay, when shit hits the fan, okay, we're on business plan B. Okay, when this happens, we're on business plan C. And so that we're not, super scared and panicky. It happened. Okay, this is how we're going to react. So we've kind of already thought about scenarios, and, when things are good, plan for the bad. And when things are bad, plan for the good so you can hit the ground running. And
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you very much for being on Shed Talk. I really appreciate that. Was a great insight. The things we know that we didn't know.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me out. This is a great spot. This is fun.
Now you know. Shed Talk.